morning, so good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, I apologize, I don't know your name. I should. We've met enough times.
Mr. Chair, it's Mark.
If you want to come to the table, then.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Morning, Mark.
Morning. If your worship could pass this way, please.
Certainly.
Thank you. And mine.
Thank you.
Down there. We give a moment for that to get moved around. With all due respect, I would like to provide mine. With an apology to the committee that I did not have the ability to put it together and send it off to Kelly prior to it, so there is no advance knowledge. There's nothing overly, thank you, George, nothing overly astounding besides the factor that you have a great community, and that community always comes out to support initiatives that the detachment drives. The first one I draw your attention to was on Saturday the 20th. We had our annual auction. That auction was extremely well received, although we had a few things less than we have had in previous year. And you'll have a note, see a note at the bottom. I did my best to be the auctioneer. I think it didn't go too badly. We did make $2,500, and that in itself, I think, is a good move towards to funds getting back into our community and doing good work.
You can sit down if you like, Mark.
Oh, an actual fact, if it does not affect anybody's understanding of my presentation, I feel that because of this committee, I feel more comfortable and more respectful if I do stand to give that. But if your chair wishes me to sit, I will.
Whatever your preference, Mark.
I prefer to stand just because that way my voice dictates farther. Our next one that comes up is on Saturday, September 16th. We did do a food drive over at the Wasaga Beach Foodland. I find the businesses also very supportive of initiatives that feed back into the community. Pardon the pun on that. And as a result of it, we actually did the best that we've ever done. Over 300 pounds of food and just over $327 in cash. Next initiative that we ran into, and this is the third year that we did support the Ymca Local Fun Run. It's an initiative through the Y that tries to get all sectors of our community into something that's healthy, and what's more healthier than our why. So we participated there, and one of the things that when we started to, I said to Karen, Karen, I understand that you just want participation, you want to increase healthy environment within our community, and the money that goes for the t-shirts for the cost just goes to the t-shirts, but wouldn't it be nice to make some money for the why? So we started a sponsorship package on the back of the t-shirts. Businesses jumped in, and this year we raised $900 for them. So it's a nice added thing because the Y doesn't promote it a lot, but it does do a lot of neat stuff in our community. The wellness fair we had on October 7th on Thanksgiving weekend. We had 21 exhibitors, both non and for-profit. This year, for-profit was a little bit of a change because I listened to the attendees in previous years and the exhibitors, and they thought that might be a good mix, and it did turn out quite well. I contribute not my preparation of the fair to having 300 people show up. I contributed to the county bringing out a whole bunch of fun stuff to play with. There was a blood donor clinic, so we saw a lot of bandages walk in, so that was quite nice. And the weather. It was conducive for people to come in. And finally, on behalf of myself and the organizing committee, and that I want to thank the town. Because once again, the town stepped up, supported this initiative. Mike did a bang-up job doing a lot of publicity for it. Your people at the Recplex are awesome to work with. So again, I thank the town. Santa Claus parade lighting. Your coordinator reached out to me to help out with ensuring overall event public safety, so we've had a couple of meetings on that, and I'll continue doing that because I think it's a great event. I have fun at it anyway. And then finally, my inspector reached out to me to do a CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, for some sections over at the hospital. So that's what I'll be doing for the next week or so. Mr. Chair, and to the committee, if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mark. Mark, can you just touch on the septic and just explain exactly what that is and what you're doing, what you're looking for?
Thank you, Your Worship. SEPTIP itself is an initiative that initially we as an organization grasped hold of it in Western region, probably back in the 1990s. And what it really does is it takes a different look at overall security. And instead of saying from a historical point of view that we want to increase the locks on your windows or your doors, we expand that beyond that, and we look at, well, what's outside your building or your community, and what can we use from the discipline to enhance that safety, to stop people from even thinking of breaking into your house, into your building. I've been very fortunate, just as an offside. About 5 years ago, Wasaga Beach Hydro asked me to come in, and we did a chat. We increased their safety. About 3 years ago, and as weird as it sounds, I had the opportunity to do not Glenwood, but the trailer division behind Walmart. Anyway, they had issue with the roads. I gave recommendations there. I've done recommendations with regards to increasing and reducing vandalism on snowmobile trails. It's an all-encompassing approach, and we do it because you as a property owner, you as a business owner, you come to your establishment every day. You see things every day. Things that might cause you grief or reduce your safety could be in plain sight, but you do it every day. It's kind of like me trying to make my home safe. I could try, but I'm not going to see everything. But new eyes coming in, different eyes coming in, we'll see that, well, maybe we shouldn't have put the ladder where it was. Maybe there are rock garden, maybe we should have had bigger boulders because people can't pick those up. You know, yeah, shrubs right by my windows, really nice, but that hides people from seeing you from the street. I could go on more and more, Your Worship. If any one of the council is interested, all you've got to do is Google that acronym, and you'll find tons and tons of information on it. I'm very fortunate to be one of the individuals within the detachment that's trained to be able to do the discipline.
Supplemental, Mr. Chair, if I may. So is this a service that's available to citizens, to businesses? How does someone go about having this done with their business, for example?
Quick response, yes, yes, and call us at the office. We also have another program that's a little bit on the same aspect, and it's called Safeguard, where our auxiliary units train to go out and do that program.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any further questions? Were you prepared if they had any questions related to the year-to-date and monthly report, or not today?
Well, in actual fact, I am not.
Oh, okay.
That information, I've been guided by my detachment commander that he would be the individual to approach on that.
Yeah, no problem. There may not be any. So. Go ahead. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to take the opportunity, if I may, to thank Mark and his team for the assistance that he provided to the municipality when we were looking at the installation of security cameras down at Beach Area 1 along Beach Drive and Woolsey Street. Mark and his team were very helpful with our staff in terms of looking at potential locations, sight lines, et cetera, from a security point of view, using some of the skills and expertise that him and his team have acquired. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the committee, and please have a great day.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor by Fulci and seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it receive the August 2017 OPP policing statistical reports for information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor.
Councillor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, next is Chief McWilliam to review the fire report.
Good morning, thank you. I'll sit. So the fire department responded to 122 calls for service in the month of September. I did speak to an incident that we had at the Waterside Apartments on River Road East, and I brought a photo of that. This was the cigarette that was discarded into the planter, so that just gives you an idea of how quickly that can happen. And as I had said before, one of the residents put that fire out with using 4 portable extinguishers, actually, the smaller ones. So just goes to show our fire prevention and inspections and making sure those places are equipped with those extinguishers. It makes a difference down the road. So. Yeah, that was circulated through Twitter. I didn't know if everybody saw it, so I thought I'd bring in those photos. We had a structure fire on Glen. That was on September 30th. That was an incident where a couple were moving into the house, and they brought a number of boxes and piled them in the kitchen, on the stove as well, and accidentally turned the stove on. And when they went back to get their next load, they returned and we were on scene and we had a structure fire. So it was contained. It didn't become a big incident, but there was about $50,000 worth of damage, because there is quite a bit of smoke that gets through the home and everything. So it was lucky that it was that a neighbor actually saw the smoke through the window and called it in, so before it got spread out through the rest of the structure. So last week was Fire Prevention Week. It did spill into this week a little bit. We were out at the schools doing the presentations, doing the fire drills. We conducted a fire drill here at Town Hall last week. There were the mayor was here. I don't know if any other members of council were present at the time. We actually filled the back stairwell by planning with smoke to see how the staff would react, and they reacted appropriately and took the alternate exit. All the assigned fire wardens did their jobs, making sure the building was cleared. Beat the time that was set last year, so it was a real successful fire drill. So it was good to see. And then just one other thing I thought I'd mention is this Saturday, if anybody's out and about, wants to stop by 3rd Street, we're doing some driver training. So that whole 3rd Street parking lot in behind the old fire hall will be coned off, and firefighters will be conducting some driver training there. So it's a full course all set up, and might be interesting for you to have a quick look. So that'll be running all day starting. I think the first person starts at about 7:30 in the morning, so it's a full day.
For what day was that, Mike?
That's this Saturday. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions? Yes, Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mike, or the Chief, sorry, Chief. I've seen that the medical calls are coming down. What are you attributing that to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's likely a blip. It's not in our municipality with our population as it is. You'll see it go back up. I just look at it as a bit of a blip. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Byfuglien and seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the October 2017 Fire Department report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfuglien.
In favor?
Councillor Brady.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you.
Okay, now I can't recall, George, do I list all the items that have been pulled first? Okay, so we have the firearms exemption request, the controlled deer hunt on 26 Ryder Road, recreation event facility report, Oakview Woods skateboard park enhancement, beachfront safety enhancements, youth advisory council, okay, are all pulled for separate discussion. So moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Deputy Mayor Byfuglien. Resolved that the Community Service Section of the Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the October 19th, 2017 consent agenda items 3.4 through 3.4.3, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfuglien.
In favor?
Councillor Brady.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
So the first item was firearm exemption request for Mr. Mogulin, and that was Councillor Gray.
It was. I had seen Mr. Moglin in the audience today, and I just thought that there should be a vote in front of him rather than push it through on a consent agenda.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Doug had anything more to say. I know there has been discussion back and
Mr.
forth.
Chairman, I could leave.
Is there any further comments?
Just to acknowledge that I did misunderstand a term that a situation that Mr. Rogan had presented to me. The terminology was to do with basically an uncontrolled release of an arrow. I call it a misfire. Mr. Rogan had a different term for the release of an arrow where it leaves the string and falls to the ground. Though that was never my intention or my concern that an arrow would fall to the ground. And so my use of misfire, misdirected arrow, or an accidental discharge still has the same connotation. And if something were to happen in this situation, I'm recommending that we not permit it because of that preponderance of possibilities it could happen, and where that could leave someone in the municipality if we were to approve this in this situation.
Thank you, Doug. Any further comments? My only comment would be, Doug, in reading all of the materials, my understanding is that there is standards for a range such as this, and currently those standards are not being fully met.
To respond to you, Mr. Chair, again, I'm not an expert. I have presented some information about known standards. This is not a range, and it isn't designed to any of the standards that I could find. So I can't definitively say that there's a range standard for Mr. Mogen's exact setup. I just have to clarify that what I see there doesn't meet the basic needs of a range with a safety lane beside it and other parameters that are considered in the creation of a range. But again, I'm not the expert in that.
Mr. Moglen has indicated that he would like to address the concerns. Is everyone in favor of that? Good with that? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, your worship, I'd like to compare it to golf, if I may. In golf, there's a projectile involved, and the difference between what I have and what happens on the golf course, or indeed a driving range, is a very wide difference. What I have in my place is my personal, private, on my property, small target area that I can use and have used for the past number of years without incident. A driving range, no one would walk out onto and would require the various safety boundaries that a commercial or even a Boy Scout archery range would require. Because then you're dealing with the public, you're dealing with multiple shooters and multiple levels of expertise. For what I'm asking an exemption to is a bylaw that restricts me from stringing or even using a bow on my own property. And that, I think, is unfair.
Any further comments? Councillor Bray?
Yeah, just to comment that I don't think Mr. Moglen is asking for permission to do anything that a lot of people in our community aren't already doing. The only difference is he's asked for permission to do it. The kids, the other people that are actually doing this on a regular basis in my neighborhood, and I'm sure many others, haven't asked for permission. So I just hope that, moving forward, we're aware of all that is happening and we treat everybody fairly.
I sometimes think I should have just kept quiet.
Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to admit, I'm really struggling with this one as well, and have been since last year. Yeah, I think where Mr. Moglen might have made his biggest mistake was asking for permission. He had obviously been doing this beforehand without incidents, and no one's brought it to anyone's attention. There's been no incident, and that doesn't make it right. Don't take me wrong, but I think Mr. Moglen has done a decent job, maybe not a perfect job, but a decent job in attempting to keep the area safe. When you look at the pictures in the corner of the garage and the house, I'm wondering if there isn't, perhaps we could, and I don't want to prolong this, but I don't think we've gone back, and correct me if I'm wrong, to Mr. Moglen and said, Mr. Moglen, if you do X, Y, and Z, we could approve this. Netting, whatever the case may be. And so I'm really struggling. I understand that if we allow one, we set a precedent, and we have to allow many, should they decide. I mean, the next item on the agenda is a temporary deer hunt with firearms on a property. We've allowed that over the years. And not that I'm trying to mix the two together, but I'm really struggling with this, and I hate to prolong it, but I would like to maybe see if there's more Mr. Moglen can do to make this area more range ready, if you will. And that doesn't mean him spending thousands and thousands of dollars, but perhaps even some netting or something that we could come to some kind of amicable agreement where he'd be able to do, as Councillor Bray says, what many people are doing already with very little experience or control in our community. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Myself, I see discharging a firearm on 100 acres completely different than within a subdivision, so I still struggle with that. I think we've had this at the table, I don't know how many times now. I think staff have done what they can do as far as information. Like other property owners, if they want to develop or they want to do something, I think it's on them to bring forward a plan that would meet certain requirements. I think for the town to be telling them, in this case, which our staff has said, we don't know what would make this safe. I would struggle with putting that on staff to be the one to tell them that. So I think that there are certain standards for these ranges and things. If you're going to do it in the middle of a subdivision, I think you're going to have to meet those standards, but I don't think, I think it should be based on an application that is submitted to us. I don't think we should be the ones to determine that. So I personally think we need to vote today. I think it's been around the table several times now.
Thank you. Yeah, my only comment would be, as well as, I know Doug, you've done a lot of research into this, significant, and once staff has made a recommendation, I'm just wondering, in the case of an accident, what the liability of the town would be. That is my concern as well. I would like to think that there probably could be some things that are done to have it comply with what the standards of a range would be, but I would agree with the deputy mayor that necessarily the onus shouldn't be on the town to determine what that is. So if there's, sorry, Councillor Eagle.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm struggling with this too and have been for quite a while. Just reading this part this morning though, could you tell me who wrote these quotes from Coach's Corner? Was this by the town or was it by Mr. Moulton?
Through you, Mr. Chair. These are, anything that I've put into here has come off of archery, and various archery sites. Some of them didn't print out the embossed heads. I could retrieve that for you. I have it on other versions. But this is not for myself or for Mr. Moe. These are from archery groups, and there are a lot of groups out there, a lot of clubs, and then people who are in this for as almost a professional sport, so to speak, have websites and also have information. So I've gone through different sites to look for information about safety, about range. I did find range standards for a number of different types of ranges in different situations. There isn't a definitive one place that I can go. So this is a quote from one of them.
Subsequent, please. The reason of concern of this is the number 3 in there under this Coach's Corner. It says, be patient with yourself and keep the arrow pointed downrange at all times so that a misfire does not result in a stray arrow, property damage, or injury. These are all the things that we're talking about. Now, I do agree with Mr. Moglen, and I think that his backyard is probably safety, but it says in here that this can possibly happen with a misfire, stray arrow, or damage to property. And that's one of the concerns under this Coach's Corner. I can sympathize with Mr. Moglen, what he's going through, and I agree that maybe he shouldn't have brought this to our attention, but at the same time, until I see in here, in this report, the safety factor removed, I can't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. I think I was taken aback about with the councillor's comment that kids are doing this, and the mayor also said that. What are they doing? Because if they're breaking the bylaw, someone should be out there monitoring these kids that are whatever it is they're doing. What are they doing? So that's my question. What are they kids already doing? Are they shooting arrows? Are they shooting guns? What are they doing? Because if somebody in bylaw needs to get after these people that are doing discharging of whatever we call it, a firearm, and that be it.
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I may clarify, I'm not saying by any means that I support this as it sits today, or I don't support it, or I support Mr. Moglen, or I don't. I believe there needs to be some more done for him to make sure that more safety standards, if you will, are met. I'm simply saying that perhaps we could assist him if he's not able to find the information himself with respect to what would justify a range type safety matter within the confines of his property. That's what I'm saying. So with respect to the councillor's question on what are these kids doing, well, I can assure you that kids are probably firing BB guns, they're firing bows and arrows, they're firing slingshots, you name it. That's what kids do. As kids, we all get these, whether we should or we shouldn't, and we take full advantage of playing with them. I did it, you did it. I would suggest probably just about everybody in here did that at some point. So what are they doing, where are they doing it, who knows it, but they're doing it. And Mr. Moglen was doing it, and then he decided, you know what, I think the right thing to do is to approach council and get the proper permission to do this, and I respect him for that. I wish more people would do that, and it means he's going to have to meet a few more challenges to get there, I'm sure. But what I'm saying is, if we could help him, because he has taken that step to come forward and say, look, this is what I'm doing and I want to make sure that I do it right, then we should be not telling him what to do, but assisting him if he requires or asks so that he can meet a standard that would be acceptable to this council. That is my point, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I'm going to allow Mr. Moglen to make one more comment, but before that, just on the discussion that's had, Doug, I would hope that in our community that if it's determined that anyone is conducting themselves or behavior that could endanger anyone in a urban center, that we would have very strict standards and have very little tolerance for that to continue. But
well, Mr. Chairman, my only comment in addition to what I've already said is in response to Councillor Smith's question about who's doing this. The publicity generated by my coming forward has resulted in a number of archers coming to me saying, yeah, I shoot my bow in my backyard. The one particular one that I was talking to at the council meeting on the 26th of September said, my neighbor shoots a longbow, an English longbow. That's something about this tall with a 36-inch draw that fires an arrow in olden times through armor into the body of the knight with the armor on. And he has been doing that for some time. Now, I respect his reticence in coming forward. However, I'm saying that he's one of the ones who has not come forward and said, this is what I'm doing. I'd like permission as provided for in the bylaw.
If there's no further question, I think we should vote. So moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that they deny Mr. Moglen's request to be exempt from the provisions of discharge of firearms bylaw number 1999-20 at 19 Dyer Drive due to concerns for public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
Opposed?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
Opposed?
Chair Belanger.
In favor.
Thank you, committee. The motion carries on a vote of 4 in favor and 2 opposed.
The next item is controlled deer hunt, 26th Rider Road, and that was pulled by Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pulled this because for years, this has come up every year, and for years, and George, correct me if I'm wrong, the council has said, well, we'll give them a year and look at it again next year. And it keeps coming forward for years. So I think we need to look at this and say, are we going to let them do it, or are we not going to let them do it? Because this year-to-year thing, to me, is not working. It's every year it shows up again. We've just seen an instance with the bow. I'm not saying that the folks on Ryder Road have got, an issue, but if we're talking about public safety again, I really don't see. I mean, they're eating their vegetables, but a lot of our residents move here because there's a deer here, and there's things that you don't get in urban centers, and when they come up here, I think it's part of the way of life up here. I think our deer population is decreasing because I don't see as many deer as I did when I first moved here 15, 20 years ago. So I think we should make a decision so we don't have to come up back and forth every year. So that's my comment.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. As I said previously, I think hunting on 100 acres is different than hunting or discharging a firearm. No hunting in the subdivisions. But you know what I meant. And as far as people moving up here because they wanted to see these things, these people have owned this property for years because hunting was part of their life. So I have no issue with it. If we want to move it for a 2-year approval, just to eliminate it coming every year, I would support that as well.
Any other comments? Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the utmost respect for the Ryder family. They've no doubt been in the area and done great things in our area, but I too have heard for many years council say, or specific members of council even say, I'll support it this year, but I won't support it another year, and every year it comes back, and every year it goes forward, and it is what it is. And I understand the reason they want to hunt on their 100 acres, but I would argue that if you're on the fringe of 100 acres in the south part or the north part with a high-powered rifle, and you're firing that towards the away from your property, it has a lot more distance to travel than any bow and arrow would ever dream of traveling. So that's always been my concern, and for that reason I, as last year, can't support this.
Maybe they should make it a bow hunt.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I could just qualify some information in here, clarify it. This request, as it has been in other years, was brought forward in 2015. And at that time there was quite a discussion about 1 year. It was approved that year. The motion at that time did not preclude another one coming forward, so it didn't say it was the last year. The discussion was for 1 year. So last year it came forward again and was approved by committee in that there was no changes in the subdivision component or residential component in that area, and it did not preclude another one coming forward this year. So that it has come forward again. I have noted in my report that I have confirmed with the planning department that there has been no further southward expansion of any subdivision or home community in that area. And to the mayor's concern, this approval that was in place for the last few years is for the use of a shotgun, not a rifle, that only can project pellets, which have an effective range of about 100 meters. And this is about 730 meters from the closest residential subdivision. So this is not a high-powered rifle that does have a range. I just wanted to clarify that this is actually for a shotgun, and it's been further restricted that there are specific new shotguns and new ammunition that acts very much like a rifle. And in the Section 4 conditions, it talks that it can only be a shotgun, and that no saboted rounds or saboted guns. That is a new technology that acts like a rifle bullet with a smaller piece of lead. This is simply shotgun pellets. So much like a duck hunter uses to bring a duck down, these are just larger pellets, less of them in the same size shotgun. So I just want to clarify that there is a very limited range with these.
Thank you, Councillor Eagle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I understand it, then there's no residential housing that is in range of these bolts. Is that correct? These pellets.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the closest residential place to the Ryder property is 700 meters, and the closest that's a single standalone dwelling. It's separated by 700 meters of heavy brush, and this closest residential subdivision is 730, about 735 meters to the north. The report also restricts hunting to the southern, so the treed half of the property and not the open field to the north, to again even just limit the exposure or the sight of hunters out in fields with a long gun in their hands. So they are restricted to the bush areas, and that's typically where they hunt anyway. I know there was some concern the original year with trespass hunting. So people who were walking around in orange, and people saw them right behind the subdivisions. That was not the Ryther group. And so a further condition in here, we have had no complaints for 4 years, but a condition in here is that the Rythers, if they have trespassers, that they immediately call us or the M&R so that they can have those people properly dealt with, and that their property be posted, and they take precautions to stop people from coming into the property.
Thank you. Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Doug. So Doug, as I look at this overhead map that you've shown here with the target on it, if you will, I'm assuming that the center of the bullseye of that target is where the riders will be hunting?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that is the most northern extreme. So that's the south half of the property there. So that is the closest point to a residential subdivision that they are permitted by this exemption to hunt. They hunt from there to the south of the block that's outlined in white. So down actually to the property line that defines the township as well, the heavy white line.
So I want to be clear here, if I may, Mr. Chair. So this is where they're going to be hunting in this area. So from here this way.
That's correct.
Nothing this way. And you're saying that the ammunition that they are going to use has no chance to reach any of these residential properties?
No, even in a angled discharge in the air, a 12 gauge load of pellets won't even come close to
So it's a buckshot? Is that what they're
Yes.
using basically?
Yeah, double aught or triple aught.
Well, that changes my mind a little bit, Mr. Chair, so thanks, Doug, for that clarification.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to Doug. The Wasaga Sports Park is there. That's that big white piece I'm looking at in the middle by the middle point. Is that the sports park?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, the sports park would be located off the left-hand margin of the diagram over on the other side of Jack's Lake.
I see. Okay.
Any
Sorry,
further comment?
one more,
Mayor
if
Smith?
I may, Mr. Chair, if I just show Doug. So Doug, there's no residential anywhere in here, except for the one home you spoke of.
That's correct. That is from my observations. There is one in Tiny Township, in Springwater Township, just where the Springwater boundary takes a jog. You can follow the jog along, you'll actually see a residential place at about the 700-meter mark.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Fulci and seconded by Councillor Bray. Resolved that the Community Service section of the Coordinating Committee recommends to Council that it permit an exemption to the Firearms Control Bylaw 99-20 to permit Paul and Marcia Ryther to hold a controlled deer hunt for 5 days in November on their 100-acre farm located at 26 Ryther Road, subject to the conditions obtained in the Senior Municipal Law Enforcement Officer's report dated October 19, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Fulci.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
Opposed?
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 5 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you.
The next item was the Recreation and Events Facility report, and that was pulled by me. Chris, you can come to the table. It's a pretty simple question. I probably should have contacted you ahead when I just didn't have enough time, but right in the first paragraph of your facilities update, it lists quite an extensive amount of work that was done to some of our facilities. And I guess my question is that it didn't indicate whether this was monies that had been budgeted or were included in the budget for 2017, or whether we had to draw from reserve, and I just wanted to ask the question.
Certainly.
And it didn't give amounts either, so that wasn't.
Yeah, no, I have a listing of all of the major service invoices here, but there was only one that was approved in council from reserves, and that was an emergency repair to the ambulance building's attic. We had a mold problem there and hadn't budgeted for this one, so $12,692 was taken from the administration reserve. And there was some leftover capital in the same job earlier in the spring when we found the mold. There was $2,100 left from the shingle job, and we used the rest of that to pay the balance of this mold remediation. Beyond that, if you're interested, I can list all of the other repairs.
Well,
but,
that's great. Thank
okay.
you very much.
Good.
So moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Bray, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Recreation Events and Facilities Department Report, Monthly Activity Report as information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
The next item was the Oakview Woods Skateboard Park, and again, that was me, and just a simple question, and actually it might be to the CAO as well. Oftentimes when we go out for quotations, the component A, B, and C, they actually list the amounts that were quoted. In the particular case of the skateboard park, it indicated sort of the scoring and the amount of money that was for the winning bid. It did indicate that the component B was a lesser amount, but it didn't provide the amount, and I was just curious if we had a standard process on whether or not those amounts are listed, because in the case of Public Works and other departments, they list all of the amounts, whether it's a winning bid or not.
Mr. Chair, further question?
Well,
Yes, certainly. My apologies if I didn't follow the reporting process properly. I actually, I believe I did go through a Public Works RFP document when I built this one, but our scoring does indicate that obviously the proponent B got full marks for their lower bid, but definitely beyond some of the other scoring areas, they didn't outdo the recommended. Their price was $29,000, but the comparable components without any municipal reference was not viable in comparison with the company that we did choose.
Yep. Thank you.
That's it.
And again, I didn't know if the process varied by department, so that's off you.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I don't think it varies by department. I think it may vary by project. So, for example, a sewer repair or sewer restoration, where there's multiple components in that type of project, there may be individual costs associated with the various components, such as the pipe, the granulars, the asphalt, the curb, all that type of thing, where in other type of RFPs there may not be that detail.
Thank you. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, just a further comment that it's come up before when we've looked at RFPs. And I know I've always liked the format that our Director of Public Works uses, just because it's fairly consistent. It has where it was advertised, where it was, so that when we're just evaluating it from the report, it's a lot easier to know that everything's there. And so I don't know if maybe at an administration level, our CAO could look at coming up with a standard staff report for RFPs, just so that we're all looking at apples to apples. Thank you.
Mayor Smith?
I'd just like to comment that it's exciting to see that we're finally revamping and redoing our skateboard park. It's been in rough shape for quite some time. I know I've received several emails from young people in our community worried about the condition, and they've been sent some pictures at different times, and I know we've rectified those issues, but it's good to see that we're making this investment in that park. It's well used. by our youth, and it's exciting. So we're looking forward to seeing this get done and them being able to skateboard safely.
Oh, go ahead if you have a comment.
I may just add further to the mayor's comment that we are interested to fundraise and raise monies for further elements, and there is space, and we definitely have room to grow. So this is an ongoing initiative that we're going to continue to work towards. But all of the wooden elements that are fairly deteriorated will be replaced as a result of these monies.
I'd just point out too, when this first came to council, I believe the estimate was presented as $50,000. So it was just more on a curiosity of the difference in process. But so moved by Councillor Bray and seconded by Councillor Smith, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommends to Council that town staff award the Oakview Woods Skateboard Park Enhancement Project RFP number REF 2017-02 to Canadian Ramp Company in the amount of $49,818.20 plus applicable taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Blythe-Folchi.
In favor.
Councillor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed. Thank you.
Okay, the next item was beachfront safety enhancements, and I'll start with Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting it. I support doing the signage and getting that out there. I think that's good. But to say signage and staffed, using maintenance staff, I'm struggling a bit with that. I know that there's a desire to do something on the beach front, making it more family friendly, having it patrolled, but I think we're stretching and maybe not doing something as well as what we should be if we're going to take that on. I also struggle with, basically saying in 2020 we're going to tie the hands of the council of the day to say that we're going to have a lifeguard program. So signage for next year, 100%, fully support it, but other than that, I can't support anything else. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, you had already.
Yeah, I did the same thing, was going through and just to see if the signage would work. To start, I do see a need at the point there that we do have better signage. And I just was thinking of, airport roads, there's so many killed this span of time on airport road going down. If something like that was on the beachfront at the point, that might bring home that, I know it's kind of a negative, but I think it would bring the message home that it's not safe to swim there, so.
Councillor Eagle.
Thank you very much, you, Mr. Chair. Just reading the report, I noticed that you had a meeting with the MFR and lifeguards and all this kind of thing. When the discussion come up about signage on the river and stuff like that, was there any interest from the ministry at all to participate in the paying of this?
It wasn't our original discussion point, but more to get permission to go beyond our agreement. They did indicate that they have a budget and they're ongoing replacing of signs, but we only proposed that we would put our signs along the river in more frequent areas, and especially on the point on the provincial park side versus the new Wasaga or the easterly side, but no, we did not discuss sharing at that time.
That is my question. That it's on the side of the river on the ministry side, correct? I would like to see you go back to the ministry and ask them if they'd be interested in helping sponsor this program.
Certainly, a percentage of that signing was for the river part, and the rest would be
percentage
our
of it, I
management.
understand. I'd like to just know if they would be interested in participating in that portion of the signing.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support lifeguards, as you know. However, as I'm reading or have read through the report, option 1, I'm struggling a bit, staff and signage. If we're going to be indicating to the public in any way, shape, or form that the area is staffed. I'm concerned about that because people will not read the whole sign perhaps, or the fine print, and may misconstrue staffed as being patrolled or lifeguards, and if that isn't the case, that concerns me. It also indicates in option 1 that posting water conditions, and I'd just like to hear from Chris how we go about that. Would we have a yellow, green, red flag system? How would that be covered?
Definitely. So there are 2 pieces to this, and I'll ask Josh to follow up if he has something further after I speak. But so when it comes to the term staffed, and we definitely heard the same question from Deputy Mayor Bifulci, if the implementations take place, we're trying to bring our beach up to a minimum standard that's set forth by the Life Saving Society. Some of our signage is appropriate based on their recommendations, but there would be a more formalized approach that warns participants that there are not lifeguards on duty, that children are their responsibility, and then gives some safety information like the wind and wave action concerns, as well as the opportunity to call for help through 911. So a second requirement for a beach that would be staffed would mean that we could make staff available, and we would have them trained so that they understood how to call 911, how to direct people to the nearest phone, or to participate in land searches, etc., to assist families or anyone who may be in distress at our beach. But that would only be through a call basis, that should a call come in, for example, to Town Hall, then we could relay by radio to our maintenance room and baggers to come down and help. And therefore we would have staff available. A bylaw would be another group that could become available should people require help. So that's what staff means. And the posting piece, which is a requirement of staff under the Life Saving Society unsupervised beach guidelines, says that on a daily basis they would post that the water is safe for swimming. So we do have the MNR currently testing our water on a weekly basis, and they have E. coli counts, etc. And we would update that posting on a daily basis as per the guidelines of the Life Saving Society, where we put up these signs that alerted people to concerns.
I have 3. I'm going to go in order.
So a supplemental, Mr. Chair, with respect, a supplemental with respect to the question already asked, if I may.
Okay.
So I just want to be clear, and I understand what you're saying and how the staffing is going to work. My concern is, how does the public understand that? How does the public know when they see a sign that says staffed? That doesn't mean there's lifeguards. That means it's that there's staff available to come hunt for your child if they're missing. So I have a major concern with that. And number 2, when I go back to marking hazards, recording and posting water conditions. So this is not water conditions with respect to offshore breeze, safe to swim, not swim. This is to do with the health department and the bacteria levels.
Just the basics, yes. Water temperature, I think, is another one of those requirements. Yeah, you did ask about a flagging system, and we have not presented that as an ideal recommendation.
So my thought process then, we know that, I mean, I don't remember a time when our beach was ever closed for bacteria. But I do recall many days, even this past year, that it's not safe to be swimming with an offshore breeze, if you're not being, especially for young children, not being watched and attended. And when we look at the majority of our drownings, I think they're probably 20 years old and older. So I'm not sure that we shouldn't have a flag system that at least tells people, you know what, if you go in the water today, you're going in, at your own peril, and stay close to shore, whatever the case may be. So there's some things there. I fully support having lifeguards. I think it's an expense, but it's an expense worth having if you save one life. If we're going to be looking at other alternatives, we just need to be extremely clear for the general everyday person in the public that they're going to be understanding and not misunderstand what the messages we're sending. Thank you.
If it's okay, Councillor Bray, you were next, but our CAO, I think, wanted to make a related comment.
Just a comment, just to clarify, and certainly Chris or Josh could jump in with respect to the signage, because I think the signage, Your Worship, as indicated on page 3 of the report, would show unsupervised beach. So it would be very clear that it would be an unsupervised beach. Staff would go about their duties with respect to what they would be doing normally. In the case where a call was made, and there would be signs that would show a number that an individual, if they needed to have some assistance, they would call, and it would be that call would trigger other staff potentially being called in to assist. So from the public's perspective, walking down there, the signage would say unsupervised, like there's not going to be anybody down there to look over the beach. However, if there was something that could happen, then the call could be made, and we would look to have other staff brought in to assist. So if that's my understanding, and perhaps the director or Josh could clarify.
Definitely, through you, Chair, Mr. Chair, I would say that the CAO's comments are exact. That staffed means strictly that we would have town staff that were frequenting our beach area, but not that we were, for example, making bag and broomers available to help in water emergencies beyond the implementation of emergency services. So we are there making sure our signs are in place. There would be requirements to keep up with this unsupervised guidelines list of steps.
So to be clear, there will be no, the signage is going to say unsupervised. There will be no signage that says this area is staffed. So no one's going to read staffed and confuse that with unsupervised.
No, this is merely that we are looking after our unsupervised beach to a standard that is required by public beach under this Life Saving Society waterfront guidelines.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you. So my question was about the flags. If the information is to do with E. coli and temperature, I just think it needs to be very clear that us declaring the water safe doesn't mean that it's not windy, it's not, there isn't a storm blowing. Because I've been in Grand Bend when the lifeguards have changed the flags from green to red, and it was probably a 15-minute period, and they cleared everybody out of the water, and this almighty thunderstorm blew through. So I just think we need to be, if we put a flag up, or if we, say at 9 o'clock it's great, it doesn't mean that at 10:15 things won't change on Georgian Bay.
Or 9:15.
That's
correct.
Yeah,
Councillor
it's a big
Eagle.
lake.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As far as the flags or the signs or something like that go, I know that we're looking into apparently electric signs or digital signs on the beach. I think that for alert and stuff like that, if somebody is missing or something, I think these signs could be utilized for these things that you're talking about. Is the water temperature, flags and stuff like that there. If we could maybe put the two of them together, then we're utilizing those signs for more than just an alert sign as far as the town goes, or that portion of it that would be the town's. I'd be interested in looking into that part of it to see if this could put this as a marriage.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, did you want to comment?
If I could, I'm
that's
sorry,
fine, sorry.
Councillor Smith, I know you've been trying to get a comment. In response to Councillor Ego's comments, on page 6 you do see a short paragraph about public announcement, and so we have noted it, although we didn't add it to the costing at this time. We did feel that that would work well with a patrolled beach option, so this would be having, and I'm sorry for the terminology, but patrolling staff available in the second phase, a more expensive phase. And for example, if we did have a hut there, a little station where these people could be found, that we thought that perhaps 2 digital signs heading east and west on an angle out towards the water would be an option. But in addition to that, I will add that we have thoroughly evaluated the flag system, and it seems that more often than not, public beaches are steering away from this without the lifeguards there, because in response to Councillor Bray's comments, it's absolutely true that at 10 o'clock the flags are green, and at 10:30 the weather changes on Georgian Bay, as we're all well aware, and we need to have people who are qualified and organized to go and check these 4 flagpoles and switch out the colors. And this is why we didn't add this. I think that it is a complementary program that we could build into our system. And further to that, our phased approach is truly because we want to work into this crawl before we run kind of thing, and organize our approach as best as possible. And the flags, I think, is something that we considered but didn't present at this time because of our I guess concerns with implementing more than we were able to effectively operate.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you. Just a comment in food.
Or sorry, Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith. Did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. I have a red flag when you talk about E. coli warnings. To me, it gives you a message that there are periods of time when we would have E. coli. If you have to post it, it means that we're experiencing it. Now, during our blue flag program, I think that means that our beaches are clean. I wouldn't even go there because it tells me, gee, I better look and see if there would be E. coli. And unless we have an issue, and I believe we had one. George, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we had one on a Friday, and we went out and called the minister of whoever does the testing, and we got the results back right away. So I don't like putting it on there. To me, it just gives the wrong message. So that's my comment.
Okay, I would probably like to refer this back to staff. I think there's a lot of options. I believe we definitely need to move in the direction of being more family friendly, and one loss of life is too many. But I also agree that, you know, the price of a full patrol beach got quite a bit expensive beyond what we had anticipated. But you know, we could definitely, like, even a flag system at the mouth of the river where you had red flags all the time. Like, I mean, they don't have to be changed. They're just, it's part of the signage program. People recognize a red flag as danger. You know, there's a possibility of, although you're not going to advertise in any way that you have a supervised beach, we could potentially have one individual on the water. For those situations where someone's getting beyond the buoys or close to the river mouth, you know, whether that's a sea-doo or kayak or whatever, you have great visibility from quite a distance. Like I believe the other drowning was potentially somebody on a paddleboard that was well beyond the buoys of the shore. There's also a North Sea volunteer lifeguard program. It's www.nsvl with quite a bit of information of some areas that have instituted a volunteer system. I had also suggested that, you know, we could consider a bylaw that makes it mandatory to wear a life jacket beyond the buoys, or if you're in the area of the mouth of the river. I know that you don't necessarily have a great way to enforce that, but again, it's just a powerful message to people that, you know, if you're going beyond these points, you're increasing your risk of danger, and that there could be a potential fine attached to that. So I would further recommend that not only refer it back to staff, but maybe we decide on a estimated dollar amount that we would make available for 2018 to do as much as possible to increase the safety of our beach.
So as I go through this, I get to the capital expenses and I see guard chairs. I'm assuming that's lifeguard stands,
Correct.
right?
Yes, 3 in addition to the tower or the hut.
And then I see personal watercraft, PWC rescue sled. I'm assuming that's something you pull behind the watercraft
To climb up.
put in. And then the PWC lift. I mean, as we get rolling here, we have, the OPP have a boat. The parks have a boat. The fire department has a boat. So to get started, do we need to have a personal watercraft? Can we not rely on those other entities who have boats already that are in the water ready to go? I realize they've got to get from Nancy Island around if it's the parks or if it's the OPP, but on weekends when it's busy, one of them, if not both of them, is usually out in the water anyway. I'm wondering if we require. It's good to see that the ATV has gone by and the high-powered jet and the helicopter's gone now, but it's you know, we were replacing these, I think, with did I see bicycles? Again, I'm struggling why a lifeguard needs a bicycle. So I just like some explanation on that. And I understand, with all due respect to staff, Mr. Chair, I understand that you're trying to make the best program you possibly can. I get that. But we're just getting started here, and do we have to do this all at once, or is there things here that we could add as we go along? We know that the program's working.
In response, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, I would say that specifically the personal watercraft, this is because our distances are beyond Life-Saving Society standard requirements for a trained lifeguard in Canada. And so it's certain that our staff will be working on the water, floating on paddle boards at least. They will definitely be using torpedo buoys when they do enter the water. But on a wavy day, when someone does get into trouble, it's fairly aggressive to swim even to the buoys of our designated swimming area, let alone perhaps a sea-doer, for example, that gets into trouble and falls off their machine and then is caught in a riptide being pulled further. So this personal watercraft seemed to be the most affordable way for us to be able to quickly respond. Without vehicles, without trailers. The lift is an idea so that we can just have it permanently parked at the river so that they can just put it in the water and be ready for service on any one day. Our idea would be to support our staff and be able to safely support a rescue. For example, I think staff would be able to swim out, but then the Sea-Doo would meet them on the other side for coming out of the river and could help with the victim or help with the staff as well. It's not unrealistic that lifeguards in Wasaga Beach have swum 800 meters to help kids on offshore breeze days, and that becomes a safety concern for all involved, and that's where the simplest, most affordable boat was considered. There is inflatable boats, and we looked into that, but they're very tippy in waves, so small Zodiac, like a 10-foot inflatable boat, but they're very dangerous in wave action, and Sea-Doos are next to foolproof. They're the scooter of watercraft. Or I shouldn't say Sea-Doo, personal watercraft, and that's why we looked into that. The bicycles could be dropped with the lifeguards because we would have lifeguards spread out, but the idea was on a weekday when our patrol program only had 2 staff available, that one would be roving while the other one was working at the first aid hut, giving out life jackets, etc. And then we would double up that staff. So that's where 2 bikes came in for weekends, that we would have them sort of zigzagging in a figure-8 pattern while the other 2 staff worked the hut.
Councillor Yu.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'll wrap this up. From the late 1950s until 1995, Wasaga Beach Provincial Park operated the beach patrol. I'm a little confused. 1950, was it a provincial park then?
I think 58 was the first year of the lifeguards. I wrote that late 50s because I didn't.
No, I'm not saying lifeguard. What I'm saying is here, it states that it was the Wasaga Beach Provincial Park, the MNRF, operated the beach patrol program. It says from 1950, well, it wasn't a provincial park until 1978. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So these statistics are not proper.
I definitely think that the MNR was here in the late 50s, but I'm not 100% without going back.
I'm just
They were
confused.
called the Lands and Forest at that time, but it was the same
Department of Lands
organization.
and Forests, okay.
But it was not a provincial park.
No.
Okay.
The lifeguard program, the beach patrol program started in 1958. And I believe it was funded by the provincial government. The former Ministry of Natural Resources was called the Ministry of Lands and Forests.
Right.
But I don't know the exact history of the zoning. I know obviously it worked with expropriation into the late 70s before the park was today's current boundaries. But I know that it was a provincial lifeguard program since the late 50s.
Just the concern that I have is they seem to think that it required in 1995 21 wardens or lifeguards to look after the beach, and in 1995 they dropped the program altogether to say that Wasaga Beach doesn't need any lifeguards. And there at that time, I understand that the way I read this was that they were funding the program at that time. Up until then, were they?
Yes.
So all of a sudden, they just said from 21 people to look after Wasaga Beach, we don't need any.
I think
Is that what I'm getting at this?
if you go further on to the following page, they were reducing, and it actually in 1995, the last summer, they were down to 12. So there was cost savings implemented, and I think at its peak it was 21, and they were downsizing.
So it was strictly a cost movement measure that they reduced the lifeguards.
I suspect. I can't imagine that they would.
I'm just asking the question, that's all. Okay, sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very interesting.
We have to deal with my suggested motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, you made the comment, but there's need to be a motion introduced on the floor if that was to happen. So unless somebody's prepared to put a motion, or you vacate the chair and you put a motion forward and the vice chair considers that motion.
Okay. Who's the vice chair?
Mr. Chair, is this to direct staff, is to turn it back to staff, or is that what we're doing?
Well, my comment was to refer back to staff and to also provide them with a guideline of investment or for the budget of 2018.
Vice Chair is Councillor Stockwell.
Well, I think, is someone willing to put a motion from the floor?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could we
Okay.
simplify the motion and maybe approve something for 2018 so that we're not committing the next 3 years, and we can put a dollar figure on what we want to do for next year? There's an appetite for that. Because I think we have a better understanding of what the word staffed means now, and certainly signage of 14,600 I'm willing to support.
Oh, would you like to put forth a motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Do you want them to verbalize that, or are you okay with it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the motion is will be prepared. So as I understand it, there's a mover and a seconder, and just to clarify the wording, and then you'll have a motion to put on the floor for vote.
Yeah, like I don't know, usually I just cross something out, but I don't know, like you almost want to eliminate that whole paragraph.
Okay.
Like you just want to look at that. But there needs to be a definition of staffed, so that people don't think that or eliminate the word staffed, maybe eliminate it.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify for committee's benefit with respect to the phasing, it indicated in the recommendation that the phasing would be subject to budget approval in those years, and that means that council would have the opportunity during the budget deliberations to discontinue or not implement a particular phase that was going forward. So just to clarify, I know there was some concern raised that there's a sort of a commitment in terms of the phase 2 and phase 3, but you'll see the line there, all subject to budget approval, and then if council doesn't approve the budget, then those phases are not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally agree with what the CAO is saying. I mean, we hear this often that we're committing to future council, so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, we all know that council is supreme and council has the right and the ability to change, to redirect, to approve, to not approve. And I would hate to see us today start down a one-year path with not having staff working towards increasing and improving the lifeguard program. I'm a huge believer that a beach, especially like Wasaga Beach and Beach Area 1 and 2 being a highly populated, highly dense area on weekends and through the week when the weather is good, and even when it's not, we've seen this year, that we have an area for families to come and swim and feel safe and be able to be there when one of our citizens of Wasaga Beach or a visitor comes into trouble. So for that reason, I simply can't support the motion that's coming forth here now. I would absolutely be more than willing to support the motion that, or the recommendation by staff. I think we should be working on a regular basis to enhance this program yearly. And I think it also then gives staff the ability, if we're approving this on an ongoing basis and an enhancement basis, to be able to reach out to other organizations to become better educated as to how we might put forth a program that will be the best it can be, but also with respect to some of these cost CEDUs and so on and so forth. Perhaps staff could be getting in touch with Bombardier and these types of companies, and maybe they'd be more than happy to help us along with some of the costs of this equipment. But staff needs to have clear direction that this is going to continue so they can do that. And so I cannot support just the 1 year. I think that we should be working on this long term and improving this on a regular basis each year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, and I will support the recommendation as is. I would have no issue if there was a line added to it, directing staff to look into all of this more, but I think I think we have too much in the original motion right now without a lot of the other information that we need. So I will support this recommendation, and I think it's staff's job, and they know that it's their job to go and look for other solutions and other information. So I don't see why they wouldn't do that anyways.
Okay, can I, well, again, I suggest if rather than create an amendment right away, maybe we should look at whether the first or second, or we're just at this point that we refer it back to staff. You've heard all the comments, and that we bring it forward at the next meeting.
Point of order. I really think that we need to move forward with the signage and at least get that one aspect of it going, and staff can bring something else forward. But for now, I think the signage, we can put it in the budget. It's something that we can move forward with.
Mayor Smith?
I think we've got a considerable amount of time, Mr. Chair, between now and the spring when this signage is going to be required. I don't see any, and I look to staff for their thoughts on this. I don't see any major concern with referring this back to staff so as that they could come up with a more maybe acceptable, for lack of a better term, I guess, recommendation to council. Again, I fully believe that we should be very clear with staff, where the direction should be clear, and I believe that council should be clear with the public as to our direction and where we're going with this program and its enhancement. It's a very important program to the longest freshwater beach in the world, and I think that we need to continue to work hard towards making our beach as family friendly as we possibly can. And so again, for that reason, I can't support the motion that's about to be made. I would fully support a motion to refer this back to staff for further detail and homework.
Rather than, do you want to vote as is, or would
Is that
you
motion?
support an amendment?
If the amendment's on the floor, then I think we have to deal with it first.
Is that, to deal with the amendment first?
The amendment is here. I'll defer to the clerk who's here to advise on procedural matters, but you have a motion in front of you. At this point, I don't see a motion to defer, duly moved and seconded, so, but I'll defer to the clerk and she can advise committee.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
With respect to point of order through you to the clerk, if I placed a motion to refer this back to staff for more information, does that, which comes first, the motion that's being presented on the floor now or the referral?
Thank you. As this motion has already been moved and seconded, the committee should consider this first. And then, should it be defeated, then they could consider a motion to refer.
Okay, so we'll vote on this.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Go ahead, Ron. Sorry, Councillor Hazel.
I agree with this motion, but I would like to see, as the mayor's talking about, can we not put on a referral to continue to investigate for 2018, continuous support towards a safety system or a safe water system as part of that? Like, we're going to okay that for this year, and that we continue to investigate for 2018 the program as stated in here.
Can I go ahead?
I have no issue with adding that if Councillor Bray doesn't. It's just add a line that says, and staff continue to explore options and bring it back to the table.
Well, that's what I think too.
That's it.
Okay, it does say commencing in 2018, which would indicate that there's something coming after, but if the amendment is fine, but I don't recall the signage being discussed and added. Like that was not in your.
Can you read it? I don't.
Yeah, this is how it is right now. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the following implementation options for an enhanced beachfront safety program commencing in 2018 for information, and then I think, does that say G?
A.
Signage, in brackets, net cost $14,600. I don't, yeah, but that was never brought forward on the original motion.
Yeah, that is the
one of the
motion.
options. That's the motion.
Oh, okay.
So that is the original motion you've just read, correct, Mr. Chair?
With one option chosen.
No, I understand that, but when it was first, when I heard the original suggestion from Councillor Bray, the signage was not verbalized, but it's showing up here.
My understanding from what Councillor Bray indicated was she just said the first year of the proposed program, which she may not have mentioned signage, but it was the signage and staff. That was what I understood.
Okay,
But just if I may, Mr. Chair, I think that to capture what I hear committee saying with respect to directing staff to further investigate the ongoing program, just for clarity, I think if the mover and seconder are willing, that a second paragraph should be added to that motion to make it clear that staff have that direction to continue to investigate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I just want to make it clear. Originally, my comments, and was willing to step down, and then we were going to be with the vice chair wasn't with us. It came from the floor. Was to also review the options for 2018. So not just beyond 2018, but we talked specifically about a number of things that can be done over and above the 14,600 in signage. So I do not support indicating that we just look at signage at this time. Go ahead.
Yeah, you had mentioned about an amount so that staff could go away and do something for 2018. I think the motion that is before you that has been read is saying, let's do some signage at that price. So I would ask that the question be called.
But again, when the motion was brought forward from Councillor Bray, that amount was not mentioned, yet it showed up on the motion here.
You never, until you read the motion, no, it was written here,
Okay.
it became.
Okay, all I'm saying is
chair.
I do not support this motion either as it is, so we can go ahead and vote on it if we like.
Yes, please.
So just staff need direction in terms of that motion, whether you wanted to add that paragraph with respect to continue to work on the implementation of further phases of the program.
No, but in my case, it's not further phases, it's also the phase for 2018.
I understand, Mr. Chair, your position,
Right.
but as I heard from the committee, there was some interest in terms of further.
Okay,
further
so I'll
phases.
read this and we'll vote, and then why don't we go from there, so. So again, resolve that Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the following implementation options for an enhanced beachfront safety program commencing in 2018 for information. A, signage net cost $14,600.
Thank you. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
Opposed?
And Chair Belanger.
Opposed?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 4 in favor and 2 opposed.
Okay, the final item for community service is the Youth Advisory Council, and that was pulled by Councillor Smith.
Yes, you can cancel that. I was concerned about the police check, but after reading it a little more carefully, I did find that you wanted a police check on the youth, that there would be required, whoever the person is, council appointed or what have you, that the police check would be done.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, Councillor Smith, because there would be youth involved in the committee, I would recommend 100% that all of the adults that were a member of that committee would have the proper police checks. The youth are not checked to the same extent that adults are, but am I correct, Shelley, that we would not require checks for the youth?
They don't do, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, they don't do police checks for under 18, I believe. If they do, it doesn't show anything.
So it'd be
right?
only for the adults.
So, yeah.
So through you, Shelley, I'm sure you know the people the youth that may apply, so it's your judgment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, any other further comments?
Just a comment. Yeah, I think it's exciting to see this coming forward. I know when there was a larger group gathered to talk about making the town of Wasaga Beach a youth-friendly town, there was a lot of interest from the different service clubs. So I'm not sure if this is the committee that maybe some of those reps should sit on, but I think at some point it would be nice to bridge a gap between the service clubs, because certainly the Lions, the Rotary, the Cadets, they do a lot to support youth, and I think involving them in and having them hear directly from the youth might be a good next step.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is built into the terms of reference that there are adult allies, part of the committee, and so what the youth that are the founding members, they're putting out letters of invitation to different organizations, and they've mentioned things like Rotary, the Chamber. They're interested in having business community involved, as well as Big Brothers, the library, the Y, all those types of groups.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it receive the draft terms of reference for the Town of Wasaga Beach Youth Advisory Council as information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
There's a second section, I believe, on my copy, there's a further that, to the recommendation. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry. And further that the mayor designate the Youth Advisory Council as an advisory committee of council and appoint a member of council to the committee.
Thank you. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
I'm still in favor.
Councillor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Chair Belanger.
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Are we okay with a very short recess? We need 10 or, okay. 10-minute recess, so we're back at 20 after 10.
Committee will look at preliminary interest for myself, check number 21708, as it pertains to a family member. If at some point throughout the meeting you find that you have a conflict, please declare it at that time. Other unfinished business, deputations, we have none. Other agency reports, none. We have a consent agenda with items 4.4.1, departmental staff reports, Public Works, Good Roads has been pulled. The Castle Building Center, formerly RONA, has been pulled, and the Wasaga River Dredging EA has been pulled. Is there any other items? Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Bray, seconded by Councillor Smith. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the October 19th, 2017 consent agenda items 4.4.1 through to 4.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
It was myself who pulled the Good Roads recommendation because we had to put in names. I'm looking at going to this conference as well as Kevin. Is there anybody else who is going? I know some are going to the Roma in January instead. So, okay, it's moved by Councillor Bray, seconded by Councillor Smith. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee does hereby authorize the attendance of members of Council, the CAO, and staff interested in attending the 2018 Ymca Annual Conference, February 25th to 28th, 2018, as well as registration and associated costs. Is there any discussion?
Thank you. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
The next one that was pulled was dealing with Castle Building Center, so I'll read the motion first so we know what we're talking about. It's moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ego. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Castle Building Center 663556 Ontario Limited, formerly RONA, cost share for storm drainage works at Riverbend Avenue, report for information, and further that the drainage improvements to Riverbend Avenue area be completed by Arnott Construction as part of the Castle Building Center site works, and further that the drainage work be cost shared with 663556 Ontario Limited at a cost to the town not to exceed $33,375 plus HST, which shall be funded from the Public Works General Reserves account. And Councillor Boulanger, I believe you pulled this?
Yes. I just had, thank you, Chair. I just had a question, Kevin. I hadn't come across this in the year and a half I've been here, and I didn't know it wasn't a 50-50, so I just didn't know the process of how we determine the cost share on this type of project.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this has been a long-standing requirement as part of the site plan control agreement with the subject property. However, through the site plan application process, which started in 2007, 2008, 2009 period, this was appealed, and there was a review process. There was legal challenges with advancing this project. But in terms of the costing model, it's simply based on the proportionate area, the catchment area, so of the drainage, and so it's allocated proportionally between Rona and the town of Wasaga.
Okay, thank you. That was.
Anything else? Oh, Councillor Bray?
Just a quick question through you to the director. Is it time for completion? October 20th, 2017, has that been moved, or are we really quick?
That would be nice. If they can make it in that time, we will hire them for another project. There were some delays, just recognizing the costs have increased considerably, and I think there was a bit of a shock to both parties when the tender did close. So there was some further discussion around the scope, but I know the
construction meeting has already been held, and that'll be advanced immediately, and with the intentions to have the asphalt reinstated prior to December.
Okay, thank you.
All right, already. Okay.
Thank you. Madam Chair, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
And the next one that was pulled was dealing with the Wasaga River Dredge EA. It's moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Bray. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Wasaga River Dredge Environmental Assessment Change in Scope Report for information. And further, that due to the additional efforts required for the harmonized provincial and municipal environmental assessments, as well as efforts for the consultants to assist the town with preparing a dredging permit application to the MNRF in November 2016, a change in project cost of $15,600 plus HST should be applied to this project. And I believe Councillor Eagle pulled this.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just a question. This $15,000, is that for the consultant or is that for the permit? Or both?
Both. It is both. We did, as the committee may recall, we did pursue a permit application last fall in advance of the completion of the EA, just recognizing the depths of the mouth. As part of the application permit process, there was considerable environmental pre-screening applications required, and certainly we didn't have that expertise and relied on the biologists through GHD to support that. So it is both.
Well, thank you. My concern is here we go again. I don't think that we should be paying a portion of a permit from the MNR to do their river. Anybody got an answer to that? Anyways, I'm just confused. If somebody can answer it.
I'm not touching that one, Kevin.
Thank you for your comments. Certainly, you're right. It's it's within the regulated boundary, and the bottom of the river is owned by the Crown. The fact of the matter is, the town marks the river. The town has delineated that channel for 20 plus years, and in doing so, we inherit that risk and liability with placing those private buoys along the river. And comments noted, and we did submit the invoice from when we dredged back in 2010. Geez, it seems like so. However, it was not received at that time either. So
I would ask that you send in another letter asking for exemption of the permit portion of this to the MNR.
If I may, Madam Chair, the permit at the time when we did submit, there are circumstances under the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act that allow, I guess, these types of works to advance in advance of the EA process under certain conditions, those being an emergency condition. And the MNR and Ontario Parks were clear when they responded to that permit application that this was not deemed an emergency as per the definition in accordance with the PPCRA, and it was not deemed to be an imminent threat to health and safety or public property. So it was declined at that time. It was not deemed in their eyes to be an emergency.
Okay, Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Kevin. Kevin, do they have a clear set of guidelines that clarifies or says what is an emergency, what isn't an emergency, what makes a piece of water navigable or not navigable?
They do have, from what I understand, in terms of a definition for emergency, certainly not from the navigability standpoint, they don't. But just as noted in the report, emergency is defined under the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act, includes imminent threat to human life, property, public services, or the environment. And then that allows, if that's satisfied in their opinion, then we can advance through different means rather than satisfying the EA. But in terms of navigability, That is something that we've defined in terms of, through consultation with River Resources Committee, in terms of what we deem safe on the river, in terms of the 4-foot depth and minimum widths to safely have vessels pass each other and clean them out. So we are the ones defining that navigation depth.
So, if I may, Madam Chair, so Oceans and Fisheries or the MNRF has no charting, if you will. It says a body of water has to be X amount of feet or meters wide by X amount of feet or meters deep in order to be considered safe and navigable.
I don't believe it's that prescriptive, Your Worship. It does. Navigation can mean a vessel in terms of a paddleboard to a canoe to a ship to a personal watercraft. So it's not in tabular form in terms of this minimum depth or this width, unfortunately.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I remember attending the meeting where this was discussed to the River Resource, and at the time there was some concern even by police and fire as their ability to navigate the mouth of the river, and that certainly I think at the particular time, and water levels may have gone up, but at that time there was concern about the ability of two vessels, two normal-sized boats passing each other, coming in and coming out, which would obviously could result in property damage. So when they make the determination that it's not an emergency, when the River Resource Committee felt it was, what standard or what are they using that we need to be aware of?
I'm sure. Yeah, and when we did submit the application to dredge in the fall, we did have support from the NBCA, certainly the River Resources Committee, the fire department, and the basis was certainly navigation, but also ice jam potential in the spring in terms of flooding, upstream flooding. Again, they go back to the definition of emergency in accordance with the Act, an imminent threat, and it was not deemed to be imminent, and as such, they did not believe that was the right approach, and in fact, we ended up agreeing that we simply continue with the EA and close the EA. And then we were fortunate this year; the levels are certainly higher, and we were able to get away with it this year. Who knows what's going to happen in 2 months, let alone next spring, but the intention of this process is to advance the EA to a point where we're positioned to apply and hopefully receive those permits within short order to address the depth challenges along that river.
Thank you. Yeah, so just one other comment, Kevin, and I believe from the same meeting, is that as the river mouth continues to shift, as it has for many years, that dredging is going to become much more difficult, if not impossible, as it moves towards a much more rocky or boulder position that I believe was discussed. So, what is the MNR's position on those situations?
Certainly the mouth is dynamic, and it does continue to extend easterly along the shore. We recognize that dredging is a short-term solution, and it's not necessarily a long-term solution in terms of addressing that at the mouth. And there's different studies down the road that may hopefully address that. But again, the province aren't the ones pursuing this. It's the town, and as it does shift easterly, we need to be certainly mindful of that, because you're right, as you do go easterly, there are boulders and the rock bed is more defined eastbound, but time will tell in terms of what happens at that point. But in terms of the dredging as well, the sedimentation may happen close to shore as it did in 2010, or it may happen further out, and so we need to be mindful, even when we apply for dredging, that the method used, it may be we may be able to do a similar operation from the shore, or we may have to bring in barges, or we may have to look at vacuum excavation, because we can't bridge to where that sediment bar is. But it changes, every year, and we're just trying to position ourselves for that. Hopefully not eventuality, but it certainly may be.
Okay, thank you. Questions aren't even called.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
Opposed?
Councillor Wright. Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 5 in favor and 1 opposed.
Okay, and we'll recess for 5 minutes just for recording secretaries to switch.
to order. This is the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee. First we have deputations, petitions, presentations, and public meetings. And our first deputation is Innovative Planning Solutions. Mr. Stephen Naylor is here to present the site plan application information on 6690 River Road East, Dreamwood Development Center.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Madam Chair and members of committee. Yes, we're here to give you a brief presentation. I believe that the PowerPoint has been attached to your agendas. We also obviously have one up on the screen. Here to talk to you about our applications for official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and site plan. With me today I have Matthew Marsili, who is with Dreamwood, and Tiro Malcolm, who's the architect. So if there are any questions that you happen to have following the presentation, we'd be more than happy to take them and answer the best we can. And as you said, my name is Stephen Naylor, and I'm with Innovative Planning Solutions. And I apologize for the graphics. They're a little bit hard to read, but we're here to talk, as I said, about 6690 River Road East. I would expect you're all familiar with the property. It is north of the Main Street and directly north of Beck Street on the west side of River Road. Surrounding the site, there's largely residential, but there's also commercial to the southwest, and recreational, the provincial park directly to the west, across from the site itself and across from the Wasaga River. This is just a close-up or a slide for a close-up of the actual site. It's hard to see, but the cursor doesn't appear to be showing up. So the purpose of this is just to show you a little bit more detail about the property itself. You'll see that there's some vegetation, mostly trees, on the south side of the property, and they're between the building itself, or would be between the building itself and Pier 24 condominiums. The Beck Street is, as I said earlier, just directly south of the site, and you'll see later through the proposed site plan that the access to the site is proposed to be from Beck Street. Again, the residential you can see around the site, and then you have I almost had it, the park directly across the Wasaga River. This is the proposed site plan that we've tabled with staff. Some of the areas where I want to point out, and we do have another elevation that we can show you, a colored elevation later on. But the building is a 4-story building. It will have, as I said earlier, access directly from Beck Street, and there is an underground garage that would provide 40 parking spaces below the building, with an additional 17 parking spaces at grade on the south side of the site in this area. There is a boardwalk proposed from the riverside face of the building down to the river itself, and it's proposed that there would be a seasonal dock available to the residents of the building. For those who enjoy boating and have boats, there would be provision for them to moor their boats, but it would be only through the season, and it would be removed during the winter months. There is and it's hard to see, but there is a picnic area, an amenity area in this location. The whole area that is not taken up by a building will be landscaped with trees, shrubs, etc., as well as at the front there is a direct walkway from River Road East to the main entrance of the building, and there's also a walk from the parking area through to the main entrance of the building. But there is an amenity area for barbecues, sitting, relaxing, watching the boating traffic on the river at the rear of the building. And it's also proposed that there would be a rooftop amenity of about 600 square meters. We haven't had the final details of it, but it would be an amenity area such that it would be available for people to come and sit and enjoy a book, and we're contemplating that it would also be covered to some extent. This slide just shows you some of the statistics for the site plan itself. So there is 106 meters approximately of frontage on River Road East, and then the site itself, which is comprised of 2 separate properties at the present time. The site itself, though, is about 0.64 hectares. As I said earlier, it's a 4-story condominium building with 50 units. The pedestrian access is directly from River Road, as well as the parking spots. There will be 17 above grade or at grade and 40 below. The parking area is accessed via back, and the landscaping will be throughout the site, and we think will provide an aesthetic view from River Road East with the building itself, as well as the landscaping that we intend to provide. The patio areas with the amenities, as I mentioned, and won't re-mention those, as well as the boat slips and the 600-meter rooftop amenity, as well, with perhaps a small gazebo or covered structure of some sort. This is the river view elevation, the concept of the building itself. We have maybe, Tiro, maybe if we put that up over here. This is a color rendition, larger scale, so you can see it a little bit better, of the building. That is the concept that's being proposed. Certainly we can answer any questions that you have of the concept, but that is what we presently are looking at, and if there are any specific questions on the architecture, Tiro or I can certainly answer them. Unfortunately, we don't have color renditions of these, but the slide shows not only the colored rendition, which is the bottom slide, but the middle slide shows you the facade from the River Road East side. The side view on the top left is from the north, and the remaining one on the right top is from the elevation from the south. And you can see the location of the parking garage underneath the building, so you're looking from the back street side. What the applications request, and as I said earlier, it's an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw. We're requesting an official plan amendment to redesignate the site. It's currently designated tourism accommodation, and we're requesting a residential designation that would permit a density of 78 units, and the official plan generally considers 74 to be the limit. So we're looking for a little bit of a relaxation on the overall density. The zoning bylaw is, again, we're requesting an amendment to rezone. It's currently zoned accommodation commercial, which is a CA-14 zone. We're looking for a residential R4 zoning with special exemptions. The exemptions are listed under the 4th bullet, and they would include the maximum building height, which is, we're requesting a 15-meter height, and the bylaw currently has a 12-meter height limit. Minimum parking, we're a number of stalls short, but through our analysis and our parking consultant, we feel that the parking that we're providing, as I said, with 40 underground, 17 above, will provide each unit with a parking stall plus a total of 7 units or 7 stalls for visitor parking. The third exception that we're applying for is with respect to the provision of parking for people with disabilities. We're one shy of that. The bylaw requires 4 for the parking requirement. Because we're requesting a variance to the parking, we're also requesting a variance of one spot for the disability parking from 4 to 3. Lastly, the as we saw on the previous screen in the site plan, we have accessibility ramps and walkways leading from the front of the building to River Road East. We understand there's an encroachment for accessibility ramps of a maximum encroachment of 1.2 meters in the existing yard. We're requesting 6 because of the expected final grade. We would need the extra variance to accommodate the accessibility ramp. I'll also note that the site is currently on the river side is zoned environmental, and that's to remain. We're staying outside of that area. We're not requesting any modification to that zone. So thank you, members of the committee. That's my presentation. We'll be happy to take questions, and as I say, we're hoping that the committee will schedule or recommend, I guess, to council the scheduling of the public meeting.
Anyone around the table have questions? Deputy Mayor Byfield.
Thank you. As far as the parking, I don't personally have an issue if there's a few stalls short. I'm just curious as far as the underground parking being on the river, have you done any preliminary as far as the water table and things or Conservation Authority approvals? The only reason I ask is you've got 40 into there, so if you lose those, then you're really stuck. So.
The analysis that has been done to date shows that we can go one level without any difficulty, and we should be able to accommodate the 40. That we don't anticipate there to be a difficulty.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the gentleman. It's exciting. It'd be great to see something happen on this location. The plan looks great. I'm just surprised that I'm not seeing more glass on the water side of the property, more conducive to waterfront property. Is there reasons behind that there wasn't more glass and glazing?
I will ask Mr. Malcolm to answer that.
Good morning. The amount of glazing is definitely something that we are looking to expand. On the corner units, as you can see, we've put almost as much glazing as we possibly can. We tried to take into account structural limitations and then put the glass within those structural limitations. So I do believe that there is more opportunity for glazing, and even from this, which was a sort of a fairly early concept, to a slightly more developed one that you see behind you, we've been able to increase the glass, and we continue to do so.
And if I may, this be wood construction or concrete?
Not firmed up for sure, but we would be looking to at least be able to do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Eagle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Mayor. This looks like a very exciting proposal for this piece of property. I know it's kind of early, but at this time, do you have any kind of approximate price range for the condo?
I think we're still a little bit early to be able to comment on the pricing. We have been looking into it, and I think once we have a better idea of what our suites are going to look like and everything like that, we'll be able to make comments on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bray.
Yeah, so just, it is exciting. It's great to see something go in on, particularly on empty property. It's a prime precinct property. I did have concern about the parking. It's almost 1/3 less than we are, than it is zoned for. And being as close as it is to the downtown and as close as it is to the beach, I think to have that much less parking might be an issue moving forward, because it's kind of one car per unit. And I think most families these days have more than one car. And when you move to the beach, you typically have a lot of summer visitors. So I'm just not sure that that we can live with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I have just a couple of questions. So I'm sorry, who is George? Do you have a question?
Madam Chair, I'll defer to you, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just wondered, because we're turning into a four-season, and I guess this is part of what Councillor Bray was saying with the parking, is that right now we're promoting cycling as attracting a new type of tourist, and we're also, as you know, very busy in the winter with snowmobiles. and ATVs, and we've got jet skis and everything else. Have you made any storage requirements for those to accommodate some of these things?
Not for ATVs or snowmobiles or anything like that at the present time, but the parking, and there's probably room to put in bicycle racks as well for that accommodation, whether they'd be stored in the underground or somewhere on site, but not for ATVs. So.
Something you might want to look at, because it's very popular winter activities here, and people will need a safe place to store things. So I'm sorry now, George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment or a question actually with respect to the history of the site. You're inheriting it as a site that's vacant, but the site does have some history to it, and I was wondering if you've explored any of the history of this particular property, and might there be an opportunity to incorporate some of that history into the design, either in the lobby or just in the naming of the building or whatnot. I'll leave that with you, just so that you could explore. But
we'll certainly look into it. Sure.
Any other comments from council? No? Mr. Mayor, you look like you got one.
I do. Thanks to the CAO, I do. It brings up a very good point. History in this community is very important to some of our residents, and so this property, whether you know it or not, was known as the Allistonia and the Melody Room for, well, probably from the beginning of the time. It was probably the first and only building to sit on the property. And so to see, at least in name, something come forth with your proposal, I think would be a great idea as we move down to redevelop our downtown and the beachfront, to be able to incorporate some of those, that history would be great. So it's a good point that the CAO raises.
Thank you. I just have one final comment, is that we've been looking at this area for certainly during this term of council, as it was previously accommodation, and we did have the question whether we keep it tourist accommodation or we convert it to residential, and we've received probably more applications to go from tourist accommodation to residential accommodation, and I think Doug that is well aware of that, and in the new official plan I think that will be addressed, but it looks like that area will eventually be residential and as opposed to tourist accommodation. Councilor Belanger.
Yes, thank you. Just one other question. I know you're not ready to address price, but obviously you're pretty far along on architecture. What is the rough square footage range for the units?
They vary from the singles to the doubles, and from recollection they were in the mid 800s to approximately 1,100 square feet.
Thank you.
Hearing no other comments, thank you, gentlemen, unless there's anything you have left to say.
No, but thank you for your time and opportunity to speak to you.
Thank
Appreciate
you. It looks really exciting. I like the use of color as well.
Thank you.
Very attractive. So.
Thank you very much.
Deputation is Mr. Patrick Towns and the official plan zoning bylaw amendment site plan application, affordable housing, 175 Zoo Park Road North, and that's the MHBC Planning County of Simcoe that Mr. Towns is with.
I hope I don't disappoint committee. I'm not
You're
Mr.
not
Towns.
Mr. Towns. No, you're not. I wondered why.
One of my colleagues, so Chris Menzies from MHBC.
Thanks, Chris.
I apologize to council. I've got my computer with me because I have some handwritten notes and some electronic notes. So I'm going to try and do this double-fisted, as they say. So once again, members of the committee, my name is Chris Menzies, partner with MHBC Planning. I'm here with Mr. Brad Spiewak, who is the Maintenance and Facilities Project Manager. I had to write that down because it's a long title, for the County of Simcoe. We also have with us Jason here. So Rochelle Hamlin from the county, and Michael McKnight, who's the architect from MCL Architects. Appreciate that. Perfect. So as committee is very aware, we're here to provide you with some details regarding an official plan amendment and a rezoning. And we've actually also filed a site plan, so I've got some details related to the site plan. On 175 Zoo Park Road. The proposal is for a 4-story, 99-unit affordable rental housing development. And I'm going to ask Brad to just give you a little bit of background about the county's mandate and about the anticipated makeup of the residents in the facility.
Sure. Thank you through you, Madam Chair. So I think most of you are aware of the County of Simcoe does have its long-term affordable housing strategy, and through county and all of partnering with all its member municipalities, we've been working through getting to that rather large target down at the bottom of the 2,685 units. And again, that 2,685 units is being created through a whole number of ways. In some cases, it's rental development like this. In other areas, it could be secondary suites. It's home ownership. There's even private rental that's going on as well in other municipalities. So through all our member municipalities, we're working through all these targets to try to get to that end goal. You can see for you folks, for Wasaga Beach, we have a target of 110. It's through our call for proposal that the town of Wasaga Beach then participated in. You were hoping to get around, I think it was around 96 units, I think is in your proposal what you were asking for, and graciously offers up to 4 acres. So this is obviously a plan to go and put towards that. In terms of our residents, we're looking at usually we do about a 70-30 split, and so this would be 70% seniors and adults and 30% families. So some of you may be aware, Simcoe County Housing Corporation does have an existing building in the community over on 7th Lane. However, it's seniors only. So this is our attempt also to try to have a little bit of family units in the community where we currently don't have any.
So I'm sure committee is very familiar where the site is. It's located at 175 Zoo Park Road. The proposal, and once again I apologize for the coloring because it's a little washed out on the screen, but we also have a larger copy of the proposal located on this board. And I'm going to try my best to explain the building design and orientation. Mr. McKnight obviously is the expert at this, and he's available to answer any questions. But it's a long, narrow property, as council is aware. It's about 4 acres in size. The lot frontage is just under 100 meters. And the density is proposed to be just over 56 units per hectare, which is going to kick us into your high density criteria because it's over 37%, which is medium, but it's under the 79%, which is the max that's permitted under your official plan for high density. So the building is L-shaped. That was very purposely done in order to fit the unit type in there. The building has been drawn up to Zoo Park Road in order to provide an urban frontage on the road and also to hide the parking behind from a site perspective. The building's fenestration is undulating, as you can tell, and the main entrance is located in what I'm going to call the elbow of the L of the building. So on the Zoo Park Road side, there's a patio. On the parking lot side, there's a drop-off area. So that elbow of the L is where the main entrance is located. The building is 4 stories in height, and I'll show you some elevations in a moment. It was very purposely that the narrow portion of the L, so the southern part of the building, was put up against what I'm going to call the Wally Drive townhouses. So the view that the Wally Drive residents would have would effectively be from the narrow point of the building, is the closest point, which is about 15.8 meters away from the backyards or the new fence of those residents located on Wally Drive. And then of course the balance of the building is even further away. There are 95 parking spaces on site. You can see up in the northern corner there's an extensive playground area, and there is additional land in the back that has the opportunity, potentially, maybe, in the future, put potentially an additional building if there is a need and desire. Along the southern property boundary, adjacent to the new fence that has just been built, there's 35 spruce trees being proposed. I have not spoken to the landscape architect about this, but my understanding generically is spruce trees can grow up to 60 feet, this kind of spruce tree in height, so it adds some opportunity for additional screening into the property. So this is the ground floor plan, and the proposal has a lot of its common space in the crux of that elbow, as you can see. Patio out the back, the main entrance in the crux of the elbow. Some of the more beige units that you see coming to the south are effectively things like a garage. There's a move-in room, there's a garbage room, there's administrative offices and so forth. And there are residential units on the ground floor. One of the things I'd like to note, this does work. I will be talking to you about this sidewalk, so I just want to point it out right now. So this sidewalk comes from the playground area, which is located here, around the front of the building. And because of the turnaround and the desire to have a drop-off area, the sidewalk comes close to some of the units. And it comes close to 3 of the residential units located in this area. And the reason I'm pointing this out is we're asking for relief of the section of your bylaw, but I will get into that in a moment. I will also point out that on this side of the development, although there are units here and on upper floors, this right now on the ground floor is a mechanical unit, but on upper floors there are residential units there. There are no windows on this side of the building, and this is a staircase. So there were no residential windows on any of the floors that look out onto the driveway and further south. So that's the ground floor plan. This is a typical floor plan, so once again there is some common amenity area in the crux and then the units wrapping around either side. There are 69 one-bedroom units, 15 two-bedroom units, and 15 three-bedroom units proposed on the site, once again for a total of 99. Some elevations. So if you're on Zoo Park Road and you're looking at the elbow again, once again, this is common area space, the patio up front, 4-story building of different material types, mansard roof, and the building height from grade to the top of the mansard roof is 12.9 meters. We are actually asking for relief in the zoning bylaw to 13.5. I'll explain a little bit why we're going to 13.5 in a moment. Your bylaw allows for a maximum of 12. Once again, this is actually, if you're standing on Zoo Park Road looking directly at the building. So this is the facade along Zoo Park Road. The amenity and patio area is here, so this area is the same as this area. And of course you can see this flankage of the building, which is this area here. From the parking lot, this is the what the facade would look like. Once again, the wraparound sidewalk that then goes closer to the building in this area. And you can see the 2 bay garages. So the planning stuff. So we need an official plan amendment. Right now the site is designated tourist commercial. We're asking to go to high density residential. Once again, because your high density residential designation in your official plan is the only land use designation that allows for apartments. And we're asking for 56 units per hectare on the site, which lies in between your medium density requirement of 37 units per hectare and 78 or 9 units per hectare. Council's very aware that tourism commercial designation would allow a myriad of uses on the site, including hotels, motels, recreational service areas, entertainment uses, and so forth. So from a planning perspective, I'm actually of the opinion that this is probably a better land use from a compatibility perspective to the adjacent residential than what could possibly be allowed in the tourist commercial designation. The rezoning of the site is both from D, development, which is council's aware, sort of a holding zone, and there's a little snippet of environmental protection located right in this area, so we need a rezoning in that to a site-specific R4 zone, and I'll explain the site-specific components in a moment. I guess I'm explaining them right now. So, once again, the actual height of the building is 0.9 meters from grade. Council is very aware that I often, if we need to look at height, ask for something slightly higher because the length and breadth of this building is such that once we actually get out to construction, there could possibly be a case where part of the building may be 13 meters high. So I typically like to have a little bit of wiggle room to allow the construction guys to pick up on the site. So rather than asking you for a relief to 2.9, because if we end up being 2.901, I'm going to have to come back and ask for a variance. I don't want to do that to the county or to the township or to your staff. So we're asking for 13.5. The parking ratio right now, we're asking for 0.95 spaces per unit. The requirement is 1.75. The county, however, has a lot of experience in these buildings and the types of parking needs that they have, and the 0.95 is well within their comfort zone. From a planning perspective as well, it is very close to amenities. It's on a transit route. There's plenty of opportunity, and will be shown in the site plan, for bicycle racks, and we don't believe that we should eat up quote-unquote real estate or pave areas to provide for 1.75 parking spaces when the experience is such that they don't need that to operate effectively. And from a planning perspective, there's so many amenities in the area that the likelihood of an excess of vehicles is likely very low. From a privacy yard perspective, I remind council about that sidewalk that comes around the vehicle drop-off area. Your bylaw actually requires a privacy yard between a residential unit and any public space, like a sidewalk, in this particular case of 6 meters. I think that's very prudent in a lot of cases, and but I would suggest to you that the request that we're asking for, which is 0 meters, or in fact that the requirement does not apply, is appropriate in this case for a couple of reasons. One, the intention of the privacy yard typically is when somebody walks out of their unit, they have a yard that's big enough to allow them some amenity space. Obviously, this apartment building is designed such that the amenity space is located elsewhere. You actually don't have egress or ingress from your unit to a yard. You have to go down a central hallway and out to the common recreational facilities. And secondly, the 0 relief actually only affects 3 units. And in those particular units, we're going to put a particular type of glazing on the window so people walking by during the daytime cannot see in. We struggled with trying to ask for a range of setbacks because for the most part we're 4, 5, and 6 meters away from that sidewalk, but we found that it's probably too complicated from a planning perspective. We didn't want to say 5 in this location, 4 in that location, 0 in this location. So we're just simply asking that the requirement for the privacy yard setback be not applicable to this site. So I am happy obviously to answer any questions, but I will advise council of a couple of things. There has been a site plan application that has been applied for. Part of the application for the OP, the site plan, and the zoning bylaw came with certain analysis and studies. They included a scoped environmental impact statement, an urban design brief, a shadow study, a site analysis from the building basically to the Wally Drive properties, a functional servicing report, a stormwater management brief, a traffic impact study, a geotechnical report, and a noise study. So I will tell you, out of all those reports, there are no mitigation measures except for one, which I'll explain in a minute, that need to happen. So no external transportation requirements are needed. The sight lines are appropriate from a transportation perspective. There's no archaeology finds on the site. Stormwater management is will work effectively. The site analysis came in good. The shadow analysis came in excellent. And I would suggest to you that there's just minimal shadows that will occur on the Wally Drive properties. 4 of those properties during the fall solstice at around 6 p.m. and 1 property in the spring solstice around 6 p.m. And the shadow analysis was done at a time and in a manner in which we did not consider the fence that's there. So it's as if the fence didn't exist. So the shadow analysis from a shadow analysis perspective came out really, really well. I would also suggest to you that from a shadow analysis perspective on the Zoo Park Road properties, part of Zoo Park Road itself will be in shadow in the fall, but the homes on the other side of Zoo Park Road will not be. So So Mr. McKnight and his team did an awesome job siting this building. From a stormwater management perspective and a function and a servicing perspective, happy to provide you with some details, but no upgrades are required to any of the external services and systems in order to accommodate the site. From an EIS perspective, the property is within 120 meters of a provincially significant wetland. That wetland is located to the north of the Public Works garage. The wetland boundaries actually have changed and have been confirmed by Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, who have identified they have no concern with this development. There are 3 isolated wetland pockets along the Zoo Park Road frontage. They're really, really, really small. We are affecting 2 of them. And it's my understanding, preliminary conversations with the Wasaga Valley Conservation Authority, is that they're generally content with the approach that we're taking with respect to them. The one mitigation measure that we are doing is the noise study determined that there needs to be a fence around the playground. We're putting a fence around the playground. So, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Around the table, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to our guests. A couple of questions, if I may. The south side of the building, so the narrow side of the building that is going to be on the driveway portion facing Wally Drive is 15, I think you said 15.8 meters?
Correct.
Which is about 51 feet away, and
yes.
No windows in that end of the building, correct?
Correct. On the ground floor, there is a door here to this mechanical room. No windows to residential units. I believe there is a window in the staircase. Is that correct, Michael? So this is a staircase. There's a window there.
Okay. And I asked this question because in the very preliminary meetings with the residents there, we ensured them that there'd be no site and privacy issues from this building. I think we've accomplished that everywhere with the exception of the end, but if there's no residential windows, you don't anticipate this to be an issue. With respect to the shadowing, you had mentioned it at 6 p.m. In the fall and at 6 p.m. in the spring. There were 4 units in the fall, 1 unit in the spring. You mentioned that this was providing there was no fence. The fact that there is an 8-foot fence there on top of a berm, and also going to be some fairly tall spruce trees there, is this shadowing going to occur then, or is that going to be mitigated by the fence?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would suggest to you, although I can't confirm at this time, that the fence is likely to cause more of a shadow certainly the trees than the building will.
So it's fairly safe to say then that the shadowing from the building will be eliminated because of the fence and the trees?
It is likely, but I will confirm that once we get to a public meeting. I will add, if I may, that the shadow effect that does occur is partially in the backyards. It's not over the townhouse units and not into the front yard.
Okay, and then 2 more minor questions, Madam Chair, if I may. The distance between the Wally Drive, or let's say the fence, and the back part of the building, as we look at this on the other side of the parking lot, is how many meters?
The short answer is I can't recall.
About 200 feet by the looks of it?
Michael has that.
Look here.
Okay. And then lastly, you talk about fencing in the playground.
Right.
For noise mitigation. So is this going to be a privacy fence?
It will be a tight board-on-board fence. It will, I suggest you, it'll look very similar but shorter than the Wally Drive fence.
And is there a concern for the safety of children within that area of it being fenced in and not open to the public to see?
I will show you where it is. So the fence is going to start about here, go along here, and come down here.
Oh, okay, so it's not going to be
this is
corralled.
completely open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. As the Vice Chair of the County's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, this is exciting. I'd just like to say thank you for the work that's gone into it. I know you've put a lot of work in to make sure it matches the neighborhood and things like that. My question is actually for staff. because the town has to do, sorry for our staff, Doug. Because the town is doing, you know, we're moving our public works yard and things like that, is all the costs that the town needs to do so that we don't hold this development up, is that in our budget for next year?
Through you, Madam Chair, currently the budget has a number of $550,000 in it, and that's for the road work that would occur in the Zoo Park Boulevard. $500,000 would be to actually perform the works, and it's a semi-urbanization, meaning it would look exactly the way it looks in front of the retirement building. So it's asphalt to grass to sidewalk to grass, and underneath would be a pipe. So the ditch would be, the open ditch that is there today would be turned into a pipe. $50,000 of the $550,000 is to do the design work, to actually draft the design work. I can advise that we're in discussions with county and in terms of responsibility for costs. The actual physical construction is a DC recoverable that would be applicable. I think 10% would be applicable to the county for the actual construction cost. At this point, we don't have any final projected numbers or estimated numbers. We've asked Ymca Group to actually look at that. My understanding is that Ymca Group has advised that they've given us an estimate to do the design work, and we're waiting for an estimate for the actual construction work. So the short answer is yes, there is a number in the budget right now to accommodate those works.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that from the town standpoint, we're not behind the ball and holding something up. So thank you.
Any other questions?
If I could just add to you, Madam Chair, we did receive approval from Mark Aiken, our CAO, as well, and the county will also cost share 50% of the design costs as well. So again, in our partnership, trying to split it 50-50.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I look at this property, we talked from the beginning, and when we looked at this site with the county, that there would we would give them enough property to be able to build hopefully another 80 to 100 units further down the road if required. There's no doubt in my mind that will be required. And so is that the property I'm seeing at the back end here that is not hatched in green?
Yes, this is considered a future development.
Okay. Having said that, I think it's important to note that you know, the county has been and has done an absolute amazing job at this, and I commend the staff at the county. I recall reaching out to the warden and the staff shortly after the election, bringing them to town with some of our staff, doing a tour, finding some sites, pointing those out. The staff at the county were very helpful at that point, and the town staff have been great as well. And this is certainly a project that this community is well in need of. And I'm very happy to say that the county has moved, I think, at light speed in order to bring this type of project to the point we're at already, and to, you know, hopefully be breaking ground in the spring. And so I commend the county staff, the warden, and the CAO for the hard work and the cooperation they've given us here at the town, and look forward to seeing this come to fruition very soon, so we can get some very well-deserved folks moved into some decent housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments, and to Chris and Michael, I commend you on the plan, and I recognize that we're in the very early stages. There's a couple of things that caught my attention, and if I may, Madam Chair, I'd just like to speak to those. The first one is just stormwater management, and I know that's a detail that will have to be addressed as you move through, but typically that is managed on site, and I didn't see anywhere where it was going to be managed on site, but that'll be a detail I'm sure that will come through in the site plan as it's more refined. The more critical to me was more the parking and the way the parking is configured. And I recognize parking is tight, but the way it's laid out, it's very institutional. And what I mean is like a shopping center, or like just a sea of parking. And I'm just wondering, and I'd like to challenge the team to maybe look at how that parking is configured, because as you look in and you drive into the site, you have to basically go to the far end, turn, do a loop, and then and then go in front of the building. And I'm just wondering to try to introduce a little bit more landscaping and some green area into the parking, whether that turnaround can kind of go up the middle and with some landscaping. And I'll just leave that with you, because when I look at it, especially on the plan, there is that lot of asphalt in the center there that is parking, and just to kind of break it up a little bit. But I'll leave that with you. I know it's a detail, and I just wanted to mention as you're going through your design process. Thank you.
If I could comment, points are well taken, but I will advise there is a big stormwater management facility right here underneath the parking lot. So we have been challenged with respect to greening up some of it, but we have to be conscientious of that engineering structure that's there, because we can't green up all.
If I can add through you, Madam Chair, your groundwater level, we've been taking groundwater readings now since the spring, and we'll continue right through to November. It's fairly high, which is no surprise. Normally, the footprint of the stormwater tank, we can make it much smaller and go a lot deeper. Unfortunately, here the stormwater infiltration bed obviously has to be above the water table so that we can actually infiltrate it. So that's why it is quite a large tank system underneath. So I know you did have one question. We are handling 100% of the 100-year flow, everything on site, including the runoff from our roof system. But yeah, it is a large infiltration bed because of the groundwater table is down just over 3 feet.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. One more question with respect to the 3 units, and you talked about the windows, the glazing. They'll be so you can't see in. What about noise? For those 3 units from the sidewalks?
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, I would suspect the noise wouldn't be any different than the units that have the sidewalk far away.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments from Council? No. I have a few questions for you. Accessibility. What are your plans to address accessibility issues?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, the county, and in particular Simcoe County Housing Corporation, we have an extremely high standard of care on accessibility. Our proven standard design now is 100% of our units actually are accessible. So wheelchair radiuses are maintained in all units. Absolutely, we do the 15% full accessible as mandated by the building code. The only difference in those suites is the kitchen. So the addition of a wall oven, the cooktop range, and the French door side-by-side refrigerator. Other than that, our units are all the same. So even the 1 beds in this unit will not have bathtubs, and they're all walk-in showers, roll-in showers, and again, that we also do that not just for accessibility, but aging in place. So in any of our senior design-friendly communities, that's what we do. We also pretty much put operators on every single door, and even in and out of garbage rooms, common rooms. So there's actually door actuators on everything, and we 100% rough-in wiring for every unit. So even though, again, a unit may not be accessible for a particular tenant, something changes in their health condition and they do need a door operator, power and wiring is already there. It's just the cost of literally buying and bolting on the actuator itself.
And that brought up elevators.
Yes.
I didn't see that on your plan.
Yeah, and it's always 2. So we're always a minimum of 2. As you can imagine, as being government, we're held to a higher standard. Elevators do break, and elevators need retrofitting. So when an elevator goes down for retrofit, the average time is 6 to 8 weeks. So that's why we're always a minimum of 2 elevators, because it will happen when it will need to go down.
Thank you. And one more question is timing. You'll probably get that today at the meeting, so public meeting. So do you have any time frames you're looking at getting the first tenant in there?
Yeah, so because some of this funding is coming from the federal and provincial governments, it's investment in affordable housing money, there's $6 million is what's coming from there. We must break ground before April 1st. And that's, again, it's tight, and that's why we're flying on our end, but again, it's unfortunately some of those tight timelines that are driven by our upper tier levels of government. If everything starts okay this spring, then the goal would be to have it finished in the fall of 19. So about a year and a half kind of thing.
Okay, so I'm on the age-friendly committee.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of our goals, for really, that came really high. And yesterday I spoke to a group at Park Place, and there's a lot of keen, you'll probably have a lot of them come over today, but there's a lot of interest in that. Basically their concern is the stigma that comes with the word affordable housing.
Yes.
And I've, told them from the beginning, most of them probably will be seniors housing. So just be interesting to see what questions come up this afternoon. I'll be there this afternoon. I think others will be there this evening. So. That's all the comments I have to make. It's wonderful, exciting. Can't wait for it to happen. So.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
We can't either, and if anybody has had an opportunity to see what the county's doing at Collingwood, it's happening at a blistering pace.
Yes, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on in the agenda. We've had our deputations, unfinished business is listed there, other agency reports, and the consent agenda. I have one item, I believe, pulled by the deputy mayor. Oh, sorry, that's under the general government session. So, I have no items pulled, unless anyone wishes to add something to this one.
I just have one question about unfinished business. There was a non-return lot grading deposit from developer to residents, but it's dated November 2017. So I'm just not sure what's unfinished that we haven't looked at yet. Doug, can you answer that question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The topic relates to some history that we have with the former Pine Valley. And that company, of course, declared bankruptcy, and they had taken grading deposits, and through the bankruptcy, citizens of Wasaga Beach did not get their deposits back. So staff are currently looking at our subdivision policies right now, and in the taking of those grading deposits by private land developers. And is there any controls that the town can exercise to provide some greater level of guarantee that our citizens will have their deposits returned to them? So what's happening right now is staff are bouncing back and forth on revisions to the subdivision agreement with a draft policy. What we hope to do is circulate it internally and also get a legal opinion before we actually float that policy for consideration at before.
Okay, I guess nothing else has been told, so I guess we can go on with the consent agenda, and nothing's been pulled, as I said. I have a motion before me, moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Ego. Resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the October 19, 2017 consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the questions, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor by Fulci.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Chair Smith.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
And this portion of the coordinating committee is in recess for 5 minutes till we get the administrative people in place. And so we'll take we'll resume probably at 20 to 12.
General Government section of Coordinated Committee. Deputations, presentations, and public meetings, we have none. Unfinished business. Wasaga Valley Conservation Authority is on the agenda. Other agency reports, there's none. So we have a consent agenda where 2 items have been pulled. Maybe only 2. 6.4.1A2, Director of Economic Development and Tourism September Activity Report, and 6.4.2, the accounts. So, all items listed below will be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be pulled from the consent resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent. Resolved that General Government section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the October 19th, 2017 consent agenda, items 6.4.1 through to 6.4.3, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended. Moved by Councillor Ego and seconded by Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger.
I'm sorry, I'll have to ask you to read that again. Doug Heron had a question for me on the way in. So
it's consent agenda. So it was the consent agenda with the exception of 2 items that were pulled.
Okay, in favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
And Chair Bray.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
The first item to be pulled was department staff reports from the Director of Economic Development and Tourism, the September activity update. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question with regard to the landowner engagement. We had heard previously that most property owners down there were receptive to working with the town, and so I had asked previously about the MOUs and how many had been signed, and haven't really heard back on that. So I don't know if that's something you can say today, or if that's something that can come in an email to update council.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We haven't been pushing signing the MOUs. I think there's a process that we're trying to go through, and there's a number of questions that landowners are asking. They want to understand what a relationship with Fran would look like. I'll be honest, a couple have expressed some concern. They're concerned about signing their name on a legal document. So at this point, I don't want to commit to bringing it. I don't want to rush bringing the MOUs back. What Fran has said to us is that they want to get an agreement signed with the municipality, and then we can get into detailed discussions with landowners. I think once those detailed discussions happen, then we can talk about the MOUs and bringing those back. I think that would be a logical approach to take, instead of forcing people to sign something when they really don't understand how this might play out. So.
Okay, and I'm certainly not suggesting that we push or rush anybody on that at all. I was just with the understanding that some had been signed, so I was just looking for.
No, so we have not forced anybody to sign just yet, and my recommendation, I think we should probably slow play that a little bit.
And we're not forcing people, right?
No, no.
Okay, all right, no, that's good, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ego. Resolved that General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee received the monthly September 2017 update report from the Economic Development and Tourism Department for information.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor.
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Chair Bray. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you. And the final item, moved by Councillor Ego, seconded by Mayor Smith. Resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee recommends that September 1st to 30th accounts, as reviewed by General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. This is pulled by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. few months ago, I had a resident indicate that they had seen the representative from National Recovery down at the beachfront and had asked, they were with the understanding that he was no longer working for the municipality. So I'd asked the CAO, and it was confirmed that he's no longer working for the municipality. So I'm just wondering if we can have an explanation for the $25,480 that's in our check register.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, the contract with our property manager has ended. The check that was paid was a result of work that had been done by our property manager in 2016 and 17, and as part of the wrap up of the contract, the town owed certain monies for services provided during that year, and so that is what that check is for.
So we won't expect to see any more for this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, with respect to the beachfront, we will not be seeing any further invoices, but just so committee is aware, that the name of that National Recovery and Management, Inc. Was the firm that won the competitive process to do the mold remediation at the ambulance station. So you may see a further payment or two with respect to that name because they are doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Question has been read.
Thank you. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Byfuglien.
In favor.
Councillor Eagle.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
And Chair Bright.
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
There's nothing listed under other matters. The date of our next meeting is November 9th. Closed session, there is none required today. And this meeting is now adjourned.